Okay. Good evening, everyone, and I'm happy to greet you, everybody, and we have you here in the session on designing data spaces. And as we have been having these days of wonderful examples and presentations and discussions about data spaces, there is quite more to that matter still. And especially here today, this time we have really nice set of presenters who are experts in their areas. I will just present that earlier when I get this technology working. Thank you. Just a second. All right. So now here we are. So first of all, we have here. My name is Tuomo Tuikka. I'm from VTT Technical Research Center of Finland. I'm a lead of data space solutions at VTT. So I'm looking at the VTT's approaches to data spaces and how we look at them in different domains, and also trying to understand that how the data spaces are working and how to design and implement those data spaces. And then we have Esther Hoyer here, who is the senior manager of Capgemini Invent. And then we have the next one is Markus Matsas in the talks. Is from International Data Spaces Association. And the fourth one is Mike De Rode from TNO. He's a consultant on data ecosystems. And then in the end, we have Edward Curry, professor from Insight Center and BDVA Data Sharing Spaces Task Force co-chair as I am as well. So we will come back to this group later on in this session, and let them also present their own backgrounds when they are speaking. But a little bit, I think, a background on this session, that what this is all about. And now me and Edward Curry, we are on this, working on this Big Data Value Association as BDVA Data Sharing Spaces Task Force co-chairs, and this has been formed especially for the understanding that what kind of issues there are in the data spaces, and what we can do with the data spaces. So there are like business approaches, or if there is some legal approaches, or if there is some governance approaches, or how to design data spaces. And especially these designing data spaces have been like emerging recently as sort of like a new approach, that when we are having these data spaces forming and the data space technologies forming, the designing of data spaces is very, very interesting. And in order to understand what kind of elements do we have there, that first of all, that we want to build something, and then also that how to do that design. Well, the motivation here is that, of course, as you know, and we have been seeing here during this event, that the concept of data spaces have really gained quite remarkable attention. And European data strategy, as you most probably know of, was published a couple of years ago, not even 2 years ago, and it has gained quite a lot of attention. And there was these data spaces sort of like delineating the way towards the European digital market and digital economy. And we think that a lot of time and effort has now been invested in delineating those sectoral data spaces that were described in the European data strategy, and these architectures that could be used in implementation of those data spaces in infrastructures. So there's quite a lot of work going on. So these developments have now reached the point where pilots and test environments can teach us how to design on data spaces. This is the assumption that we learn from these developments. And most probably it is so that the winning formula for data spaces will be found from the successful designs of these projects. So therefore, this task force that we are in with Ed and me and many other people who are involved, that we target contributions on how to advance the design of data spaces and what are those learnings that help in designing data spaces and make the process of design more systematic and methodological. So sort of like resources, bits and pieces that we need to have in order to have some generic understandings that how do we do these designs. So now this workshop is intending to reflect upon the current developments and seek for approaches for designing data spaces from design principle to actual activities of design. So I could see that in this session there are people who are really actually doing and looking at the activities going on, so we can learn something from that. I don't think I need to too much go in deeply into what are data spaces, because I think that this audience is very well aware of this development. But then again, it's what I'm trying to say here is that there are many points of views to data spaces, and it is always a little bit challenging to look at the old points of views when you are working on data space topic and try to figure out that what does it mean. And from user point of view, one aspect could be like you are looking at it's so that the users of data spaces are enabled to access data in a secure, transparent, trusted, easy, and unified fashion. It might be also so that the users would be appreciating also easy access and clear user interfaces and other aspects in order to make the service work. So the access and usage rights is one very important point, but there's quite a lot of many other things in the user point of view as well. So next one is I think that from technical point of view, we are looking quite a lot of this or seeing quite a lot of technical development and specification development at the moment in Europe, and this is definitely very interesting to see that where does this technical development go, and it's planned to be supporting the effort of going towards the digital market. So let's say from technical perspective, a data space can be seen as a data integration concept, and this is how we see it. Okay, we want to integrate data somehow in order to create data spaces. And there is no common database schemas or physical data integration, but it's rather based on distributed data stores and integration on an as-needed basis on shared policies and rules. Yeah, sounds really good. And this, I think, this is one of the key points of data spaces to be formed. And we are talking about federation of data and federation services and so on in order to create this. So it's very techy perspective. So also from general point of view, you could see it so that the European data sharing space refers to a digital space which is composed of or connects multitude of distinct spaces that cut across sectoral, organizational, and geographical boundaries. So within this framework that we are having with this usage rights and all these technical things, so you can have these data spaces which are really like penetrating through different sectors. And this is also very intriguing in a sense that there are much value which we don't know of yet. So, you know, you can pretty much very quickly start thinking about what kind of value statements that there would be if we have all of the data in the Europe. Maybe we make people 100 million people more healthier or something like that, that we can start vision of this opportunity. But at the moment the situation is so that there's a lot of concepts. If you look at the data space development or any materials, you try to understand and try to go into that material. So there is, I think, quite a lot of things to wonder. And this picture is sort of like clustering things that where we are and what is important for which part in this arena. And but then again, of course, it's not exhaustive. It's just stating that, okay, there's data sovereignty, there's data level playing field, there is public-private governance, which is like, or data spaces, which is coming from data strategy, and then there's like technical specification development in Gaia-X, which is about federation services or about privacy security, as well as in international data spaces, or then fireware. So this is very vague pictures at the moment, but it tries to like frame that where these developments go and where what we are doing different different organizations. But then again, you know, certainly there is a lot more of these concepts that we need to or want to understand. So the work is from let's say designer point of view, or let's say if there is like ecosystem designer, somebody's doing the ecosystem design, which is very different from the information system design earlier, when there is like these silos where like you made one system and then it worked for one purpose. But this is a very different perspective to information systems development, and maybe we need to have new kinds of methodologies and tools to do that. Well, now, if you look at this story in a sense that we saw that there are a lot of concepts ongoing. There's a conceptual ecosystem development ongoing. And in other places, you can see a lot of experimentation, piloting and learning. And I think we have been seeing here during these days also many of these approaches. And I put the background there with this kind of lightning, because there's a storm going on. There's a lot, like we are in some kind of storm, and things are coming up and we try to figure out that what are the most essential things and generic things, design principles or other principles. What is the legal framework and so on, in order to make the data spaces happen. So, but there's also this, that we need to understand that eventually there must be some kind of goals that make the effort worthwhile. And these are like business goals or some other benefits or savings that you can see from that. Or maybe we make the climate better, or somehow intervene with the climate change using the systems that we are having. And do this data sharing when we have enough information about what is happening around Europe, let's say. Anyway, there must be a business goal or some other benefit. But then again, in conceptual ecosystem development, we still look at the concepts to work on, and these should be like helping us in order to gain this bigger benefit. And this conceptual effort is going to go on, and there's like Data Governance Act and Data Act and whatever is coming up that bringing us new frames to wonder of that, how we actually like digest that information in order to create this new way of designing of data spaces. While we are doing this, we are at the same time doing this experimenting, piloting, and learning. And this is something we have been seeing. There are a lot of projects that are working on this, and we are trying to understand what are the best practices that there are, and what kind of learnings we can get from there. So we try to learn from this effort, and in order to create better world in a sense. But in data spaces also the concept of trust is central, and this is something that must be like in every place. It must be implemented, it must be specified, and it must be taken into consideration when you take that into business, that what kind of trust scheme do you have. That's one thing, which is very central thing. And in Big Data Value Association, we have been like looking at this let's say data sharing value, that how do you create value from data spaces, and it's we came out with the white paper, which was a production of many colleagues and workshops and events that what kind of elements there should be, this kind of core pillars for data spaces, and we distilled like 5 dimensions that are like basis for the data spaces, data sharing value wheel, and there's governance, people, data, technology, and organizations. And here is in fact the depiction of the value data sharing value wheel. There's you can see that if you look at the governance, that's about common rules, guidelines that must be there. Then people must be skillful, and organizations must have new business models, and so on. And of course, data. Every time you look at this wheel, you can see that there is quite a lot of things that you need to look at and wonder that, think about that in order to make the value come out. And then we may talk about, let's say, technical maturity. That what is the maturity of technology? If there are the right components, the right things, and they are being done in so way that it supports the data space development. Then organizational innovation is also needed. So of course this means there's this business model perspective, so that every CEO who is like involving the company to data space endeavor so must think about that. What is the new organization that we are in? What is the data-driven business? What does it mean to us? And this is something we haven't seen yet clearly, that in my opinion, but then again, it's something that the colleagues here can also challenge. And the last from these examples is skills development. We can see that even from the data strategy that there are like let's say a lot of more data enabled, all the data skills needed, and the data spaces is no less. But then again, the question is what kind of skills we need in the future for data spaces. That is something that do we like educate our people, young people, with the whole stack of this what we have or what we are going to do. Well, now we go into the presentations, and I'm really glad to have this group here, and thank you for coming. And I think that we do it so that we'll start with Esther. And Esther, please, can you also introduce yourself while you have giving the presentation. Thank you. Let's try the technology now.
Sure. Thank you very much, Tomo. Could you confirm that you see now my slides on the screen? Great. Perfect. Then that's good. So again, also welcome from my side. Thank you for having me, and thank you to all of you for being here with us. My name is Esther, and I work as a senior manager at Gemini Event, where I work on collaborative data ecosystems. So you can imagine that data spaces are kind of a sweet spot for me, for us lately. I'm the project lead for 2 projects for the European Commission that are at the heart of our thoughts and drivers towards data spaces and data ecosystems, which is the Support Center for Data Sharing and data.europa.eu. And well, today I don't want to go into too much detail about these 2 projects, but I would like to share with you what we learned from those 2 European approaches supporting data sharing. First, let's take a step back to start with some good news and remind ourselves once more why this is so important. And at the same time, try to put some numbers there, because as you will see later, quantifying the actual benefit that we want to achieve is very vital and very complex. So this is us trying. We can save up to 200,000 lives annually in Europe, thanks to real-time traffic data that helps emergency services like ambulance cars to arrive at the scene of an incident 1 minute faster. Another example for you, using data on malaria in applications can help us to save 400,000 lives globally annually. And I have a few more of those for you. We can save lives by creating apps that help first responders to administer CPR in cases of cardiac arrests. We can, of course, save millions of hours waiting in public transport by having real-time traffic data. We also can save a lot of energy by using data on the use of energy and saving energy. All of this also has a cost component. Well, you see here, administering CPR in case of cardiac arrests by using data can help us to save thousands of money for the healthcare sector, because the people are less long in the hospital, have less severe after effects. So that's good for the people, good for our budget for healthcare. Same as we can save money if we would just work instead of waiting on a train, or would use the time to detach and work even more efficient if you wanted to look at it that way. And we can, of course, save money on our electricity bills. So what we actually need to look at is stop the conception or even misconception that our biggest challenge is to protect data. Our biggest challenge right now is on how to unleash our data and its insights. Because if we master our data ecosystems, our data does not need protection. And many organizations know that already, and they do that, and you know that. And our research institute found out that 40% of the 750 organizations we asked in private and public sector are also aware of that and preparing to be part or launch a data ecosystem, like being part of a data space. And now we can look at, well, unleashing this data. And obviously I'm aware that it's not that easy. We have closed data, which is easy because you don't want to share it. That's fine. And then you have data or the insights of data that can be shared. So here it is a bit more complex. And on the right side of the spectrum, we have open data, comparably easy to share. And this is why we, 1.5 decades ago, I would say more or less, started with that, how to share open data. And now I would like to introduce you briefly to data.europa.eu, which is, if you want, the manifestation of the European open data space. It is the official portal for European data, for open data from European countries and European institutions. We harvest the metadata from open data portals across Europe in the countries and institutions by creating, in the last decade, this complex network with the open data representatives there. We're also measuring the maturity of the open data in the different countries. And by doing that for 7 years now, we learned a lot about how to set up a data space focused on open data. What did we learn? Standards, semantic interoperability, metadata quality. All of this is not nice to have, and it's not just for academics and a public sector. If we don't have the right standards in place, we'll never be able to really reuse the data. And I say reuse, and what I mean by that is using the data beyond its initial focus. Many of you use reuse in that way as well. And that's, of course, very complex and very difficult because of the diversity that comes with the data and metadata. So we want to focus on impact and prioritize the data sets that bring the most value, that create the biggest impact. That's what we learned. The key word here is high-value data sets in the open data sphere. And the last point is governance and diversity. How can we govern a huge ecosystem and a network of stakeholders across Europe, where there's so much diversity in maturity, in the data, in the digitization, but also in the ethics, for example, the perception of privacy. So these are learnings from data.europa.eu that I would like to share with you, and move on to the second project I was telling you about, which is the Support Center for Data Sharing. This is a service from the Commission that we are running to provide legal guidance, technical guidance, and to link the expertise of data sharing practitioners and researchers, also on the business side of things. So what we, for example, do is we looked into what law is applicable to data sharing to begin with. Well, you might think of GDPR, but there's way more law already existing. So when we always talk about the absence of a legal framework for data sharing, that's not completely wrong, but not completely right, because there is already a lot that needs to be considered. We then moved on and looked into what model contract terms can be used for a data sharing contract. We looked at different sectors. And we now have, for 7 sectors, recommended model contract terms for data sharing agreements. We also have a licensing assistant on the website. In terms of technical guidance, we have a lot to learn about APIs, obviously, data traceability and lineage. So lots of technical guidance. And one thing in particular I would like to show you. For 2.5 years now, I believe, we are interviewing and listening to the stories across Europe and beyond of organizations and individuals that drive data sharing to do this, what we heard earlier from you, Tomo, who actually are out there and share data. And we learn from them and understand what was difficult and what worked well. And that's truly inspiring. So I invite you to look at those interviews and the story behind them. So what did we learn at the Support Center for Data Sharing? And I think the biggest learning is there has to be a business case. Data sharing happens because there's a need, the perception of a need, or the perception of a gain, a potential gain. So what is the business case? Is there a business case? And then we have to create a business model, and that needs to be individual, and it needs to have the equation of risk, costs, and value in it. What are the risks? And let's say, modest about them and neutral. They are risk, but we can mitigate them. Let's not be afraid of GDPR. Let's use it in its potential that it brings and the value that it brings. So what are the risks? how can we mitigate those risks, for example, with a data sharing agreement? What are the costs? We need to understand in individual cases who will bring in what cost, and what is also a pricing model if we talk about monetary costs. And then lastly, my last point, to close the frame, what is the value and can we quantify that value? In the beginning, I shared with you how many lives can be saved and how much money can be saved. These are all approaches of understanding the value. We did this in a general way for the whole of Europe, but each business case and each model that comes out of it has to understand that value for itself. And that's where we need to gain more experience and have a solid base to help organizations to cross the perceived barrier and actually be part of data spaces. And that's it from my side. I'm looking forward to our discussion and your questions. Back to you, Tomo.
Yes, thank you very much for your inspiring talk from the numbers and also from all this what you have been learning during your effort, and happy to hear about this data sharing, this support center. So it's there has been quite some time. So you must have a very good understanding of what kind of questions there are, and these model agreements are there for I think they are for everybody to use. Is that right, Esther? So that it's like open to everybody, and
yes,
it's actually working so that you can call Esther and ask about what kind of model. I was looking at the questions here that if people are designing things and they are needing the resources and to do these things, so your center is something, an organization to turn to in a sense.
Definitely, there's general support on EU data sharing .eu, but also individual support by our team of tech and legal experts.
Yeah. So how do you think now that when you have been looking at the data sharing, so do you think that this data space is something different, or is this going to be the same, very same thing, whole thing?
Mm-hmm. What I like so much about the data spaces approach at one kind of a data ecosystem is that we have trust by design, or trustless tech enhanced infrastructure, because a lack of trust has been at the forefront of barriers so long, and answering that with a solid design approach. That's so important, because then we can leave that topic at least partially behind us. The idea of federation is great. So it is probably one of the most sovereign approaches to data sharing, what I find so important. And it also emphasizes the idea that we're going beyond data monetization. This is not us creating a licensing agreement and selling data. This is an ecosystem coming together, looking at the benefits based on the insights of the data. And that doesn't necessarily mean that someone is paying for something. It means that we have a social political benefit of this data ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. So I think, well, just the chat question, Ed, my co-moderator, do you have something in your mind?
I do actually. Esther, thank you very much. Fantastic presentation. I'd like to point out that Ireland has been the top of the maturity model, or the maturity ranking for open data portals the last couple of years. So we're very proud of that, because Insight have been one of the key
you can be
involved in that. It's great. And what I particularly like, Esther, is the fact that you're describing today's open data portals as small data spaces, because I think that really says that this type of infrastructure is there. Okay, it's very immature. This is the first step, but there's a lot of history, there's a lot of experience that's gone into getting open data to this point. And now the vision that we have from the Commission with their common European data spaces, and the visions that we're seeing coming from industry as well, complement this very, very, very nicely. I'm wondering, what kind of lessons do you think that we could have learned now from the open data movement that, you know, could really enable us to help fast forward our common European data space perspective? Mm-hmm. If you were to pick the one lesson that you've learned from all your experience, what would it be?
Mm-hmm.
Not to put you on the spot.
That's difficult. I mean, the one I believe the 2 or 3 I chose, depending how you want to see it, are the ones I find most important. Not to iterate again on semantic interoperability, because that might be a little bit technical. I would say it's beyond that. It's the power of the individuals. They say the first movers. What I see often that we need lighthouse projects, and we need those people that go forward, are brave, and carry the movement a bit, I'd say. So it's really what we also see when we look at different countries and the maturity of how they share open data. It's often around a small team of believers. And I believe we have that as well. And what I see already is that it groups around these people or around these organizations. And then the rest comes. Yes, then we will have standards, and we have business models and business cases, because we continue talking about it, and people just spend so much effort because they believe in it. They believe that this is a good thing, how we can overcome local and global challenges.
Great.
But that answer probably also counts for many other things in life.
Yeah, but equally valid here. Equally valid. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Very, very good. So, okay. So maybe we'll just let Esther off the hook now, and let's go to Marcos. Marcos Matzes, are you there? Okay. Hi, Marcos. So, great to have you here. And is your audio working?
I think it's working, and I hope that you can see also my screen in presentation mode. That's great. Thank you very much. And it was a great presentation from Esther. I'm really happy that we saw also these very nice examples. I'm going to go with a presentation about how International Data Space Association is contributing to the whole area of designing data spaces and making them interoperable. So just to start with where we are right now in the evolution path of data spaces, we have had in the last 5 to 6 years that IDSA has been active in the area, a lot of convincing use cases with many players out there, and it's time now to grow to a more real data spaces, many to many, but also with clear business impact as the market is right now ready, and the needs are expressed and have been defined, and not only create real data spaces, but create also interoperable ones. And this is what I think designing data spaces is all about, because there are great designs out there, but they have to be somehow in a way that they can create interoperable solutions. So just another slide that just shows from our side what we think are the features of what data spaces are about and what they should, let's say, ensure. And these 6 features are let's say, basis here: the trust, the security, the making, being able to explain, find and understand data, standardized interoperability, of course, and always the data, the apps that add the value to the data that is shared, plus the whole data trading. So what is missing? What is missing to enable more? thousands of data spaces. It's exactly the soft, intangible infrastructure that will not only allow data sovereignty, but also platform interoperability across multiple domains that are out there. And this is what we have defined as RDSA as member of the OpenDI project as the soft infrastructure with this paper, the position paper design principles, the first version. And this soft infrastructure, just like the other known ones, like the infrastructure of internet, has to be sector agnostic and to cover as many requirements from different sectors as possible. And it seems that this is not actually a technological challenge to create such a soft infrastructure, but it's more like a coordination one. There are so many standards out there, but there have to be agreements on standards that could be accepted by all participants and all contributors to the creation of data spaces when it comes to functional, technical, operational, and legal aspects, plus the business ones. So the real challenge is in viewing interoperability, I would say, as the new norm for facilitating this mass adoption and scalability of data spaces. So on our side, we have a reference architecture model and some other things that let us be the base for data space, and with our collaborations with other initiatives. What we offer in the game is with our reference architectural model that has matured in the last years, and the other parts of our what we call the magic triangle, with the certification allowing the trustworthiness to be ensured, but also the rulebook that is basically discussing the implementation of ideas in the real world, how to run a data space, plus the portfolio of open source building blocks that basically creates a reliable foundation for commercial offerings based on IDS. And we have used all that, and we have brought this in the last year in many projects and initiatives. And it's now time, and this is one of our efforts that I would like to introduce to you today, to bring all this together with the great material and elements that are out there that we have identified in Europe through our collaborations with different other initiatives and organizations, the elements for soft infrastructure. And it's time for creating something a bit bigger than only the design principles, that we call it the common framework for data spaces, which will be how to design, build, and run a data space that we think that this is what is going to allow data spaces to be created in a same way for different sectors, and allowing participants to participate in multiple data spaces and switching from the one to the other in a seamless fashion. So to ensure that, and to work with great focus on that, we joined forces with three big initiatives, BDVA, Fireware, and GaiaX, and we created the Data Space Business Alliance, which has a very clear goal of making data spaces happen in a way that we follow, of course, the design principles that I just mentioned. I don't want to, of course, give you all the details and bore you with that. This is the bigger plan with the key building blocks that we have identified that we should, as initiatives, work towards to create, as you see, the common data space framework and other parts that will allow our idea to be realized. And we brought this together in a 100 days plan, let's say. We're based also on the design principle for data spaces that has identified this technical and governance building blocks. And our plan, we came up with some first actions that have to do with how we want to create, for example, a radar that will identify promising endeavors, but also next to the framework, other efforts like how to operate data spaces, different kind of templates for deployment. And this came down to a very specific quick wins, as we call them, to align the different hubs on what kind of activities they can offer in implementations of data spaces, the architecture coherence between these initiatives, and the activities of radar and deployment through data space support center and other support initiatives. I will mention only two last things, and this is one, the radar. We see it as the first, not only quick win, as one of the most important steps of bringing in our radar, letting us see and what is out there, what kind of initiatives, what kind of endeavors, what kind of consortiums, data sharing ecosystems are right now out there and need our support. Not to create yet another silo, but to create something that can be linked with and connected with other data spaces, so become part of a bigger one. So we have this approach, and there's also already a registration form that you can become part of, and this will be promoted also very soon more, so that we can go through this 4 steps that we're describing here, like identifying the lighthouses, the ones that need our full support because they are not only promising, but they have already things in place to go towards live, to become a data space, but also the whole matchmaking process, bringing together implementation partners, experts with consortiums that want to progress make progress with their data space creation efforts. And one, of course, all of you must have heard about the CSA that was announced from the Digital Europe program. And it's obviously for us a very great opportunity to perform one of the activities that we have promised, and we think it would be of value, the matchmaking for it. We have for the different domains that have been announced for the CSA from the Digital Europe program, a matchmaking event to bring together, team up different representatives from the Alliance, but also different players out there that want to create the first data spaces of the bigger European domain data spaces that have been envisioned from the Digital Europe and the data strategy, and follow us, be part of it on December 16th. And I'm happy to answer to you any questions if you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcus, for excellent presentation. It's quite a lot of good things you were having there, and just was wondering that just this kind of question that it's great work is to have this radar in place, and this radar is like identifying those data spaces that are existing. And is there also some kind of like other let's say other kind of key KPIs, let's say like maturity is also involved? Is that right? Or
so the radar, first of all, we as IDSA have created already a kind of radar, and we consider this DSPA joint radar as an evolution of it, where we have also identified maturity levels based basically on where exactly the endeavors, the different endeavors see that they are right now. Why either maybe they have created already a pilot, or they are going towards live, or they have just started the journey. But this evolution of this radar to a bigger one has also brought new kind of maturity evaluation, maturity assessment tools that we want to implement. And this is why in DSBA we have created a task force for this that will come up with the ways of, in a neutral way, evaluating, assessing how mature this kind of endeavors are, data spaces are, in terms of how close they are to the design principles for the different blocks, or how, so to say, market ready they are. So if they can really, in an operational way, and there are also a lot of tools to measure that, can operate the way they are supposed to. So there's more to come. This is just a registration form. It's a quick one with a few questions, but in the process of bringing more cases on the radar, there will be a bigger evaluation for all data spaces.
Thank you. And Marcus, I have one more question. I was wondering then, when looking at what this IDSA has been doing from design perspective, and I understood that there is, as you mentioned, there is this rule book. And I was just wondering that I like this document on the design principles you presented too, and this models there. So is this rule book and the design principles somehow connected, or is that like different levels of this approach? Or
the rule book is at least the first version of the IDSA rule book. Was more on how to run and operate. So it is based on the design principles, but it includes more on how to run the data space and operate it. What we call the framework, which would be more or less a continuation of the work on the first design principles paper, will merge them in a way that it will include both in one document. So going from how to design with the design principles to how to operate with the evolution of the rule book. So this is the short answer, I'd say. Yeah, but I think this is very important information if you think of people listening here and thinking that how to create, what to do with what should I be doing with the data spaces. So, like saying that, okay, Marcos, now what should I be doing first that if I start the data space? So what would you answer? What is your answer? My answer is that let's wait to see the Common Data Spaces Framework, the first version. That is one of the very key documents that DSBA will produce as an alliance. That will basically be like when you get a Lego and you want to know how to build it, it will be this part. So how to start from the beginning to create the data space that you need. Okay. So I think that's very good. Thank you very much, Marcos, for the great presentation once again. My pleasure. I will let you also off the hook now for a while. And we will have next Mike Davoda from TNO. And I think, Mike, are you online?
Yes, good afternoon all.
Perfect. The stage is yours.
Thank you. I think we're all set, so let's start. I'm Mike Davoda. I'm a consultant at TNO, at the Data Ecosystems Department. And TNO is a Dutch research and technology organization. And in parallel, I'm also a community manager for the Smart Connected Supply Network. And this is one of the data spaces which has been already out there for a couple of years. So that's also the content for this presentation, to zoom in on the SCSN and to see whether we can gain some lessons learned from our practical experience on how to design data spaces. So we will start with a brief introduction of SCSN and why it has been set up, what the governance of it is, and how we came to a concrete operational data space. And then in the end, we will end with some recommendations and with some lessons learned. So first, the SCSN. So, as you might know, in the Netherlands, we have quite a strong manufacturing industry. And this manufacturing industry is mainly specialized in low volume, high complexity, and high mix production. And what does this mean? This means that we tend to build rather complex products with a very low volume. So imagine that you build a semiconductor product, for example, or a medical machine. You have to set up a complete supply chain for that, but you can only develop maybe 5 or maybe 10 of these products. So there's a lot of overhead in developing these products. So we have to collaborate very efficiently. And that creates all kinds of practical problems, and we would like to address within the SCSN. So I've illustrated a very basic supply chain, and what is commonly done in manufacturing is that there is one original equipment manufacturer in charge of creating and developing this product, but this OEM does not develop the product completely by itself. It has a very strong network of suppliers, which each develop small sub-assemblies or components or small parts, which are used by the OEM to produce a final product. So in order to assemble such a product, you need to collaborate intensively with your partners. And these partners tend to also have partners, etc., etc. So you have quite a deep supply chain network, which is illustrated in this picture. And the most basic information which needs to be shared in this network is regarding purchase to pay information. So you have to order information, you have to send the technical product data of these components which need to be developed, all kinds of logistical information, measurement information, and of course, invoicing. So these are information types which are really required in order to set up collaboration in the supply chain. And what we saw a couple of years ago is that this creates a lot of administrative burden because of a lot of this information is manually communicated via email, for example, via portals, via fax even in some cases. And this required, on the one hand, minimal input from the customer perspective, but at the same time, the supplier also needs to type in all this information over and over again into all kinds of systems. So a lot of waste created in this collaboration, which mainly results in a lot of administrative burden, making supply chains less agile, and in the end, makes it very costly to collaborate in this fashion, especially if you recall this low volume setting, so where the overhead even has more effect on the total production. And what we also have noted is that if you look at this very simple supply chain, then especially at the beginning and at the end of the supply chain, there tend to be quite large organizations which tend to have quite mature IT processes and IT systems, and they are relatively well adapted in terms of digitalization. But especially in the middle of the supply chain, we have a large network of SMEs, very small companies, which tend to have not expensive IT systems. They might not even have an IT department. So it's quite complicated for them to get along with these digitalization efforts. And within SCSN, we wanted to create a solution which can help both these large companies, but also these smaller companies. Because even in a small country as the Netherlands, we have about 18,000 of these small and medium-sized enterprises, which all contribute to the development of these complex semiconductor products and other machines. So our goal is to have one approach for the complete supply chain. Now, how did we do that? We have basically have two different components I would like to showcase. So on the one hand, we created a semantic model. So basically a language for the complete supply chain to structure the information in the same setting. We of course base it on all kinds of international standards, such as Universal Business Language. And there we basically specified this for the manufacturing industry. So now the complete supply chain can talk the same language. And this sounds very easy, but this is quite an elaborate process and took us several years to accomplish by intensively collaborating with both the IT suppliers and the manufacturing companies. This is just one part of the story. The second part of the story is how do you communicate in a scalable way? So if you take a look at traditional approaches, so for example, EDI, illustrated at the left side, yes, you see a scenario where if two companies want to collaborate, they have to set up a custom connection between them. And this can work quite well once this connection is set up, because this is completely tailored to the situation. But the downside is, of course, if there's a third company, then the same investment needs to be made. This is quite expensive, so that can be tens of thousands of euros for one connection. So maybe for the larger companies, so at the beginning and the end of the supply chain, this is feasible, but especially not for the small and medium-sized enterprises. So it works, but scalability is an issue. So what we have saw emerging in the past 5 years is the so-called service provider model. And in this case, one service provider or integrator wants to connect a whole range of end users. And the service provider ensures that all the communication is translated and integrated with all his companies. This is already a major advantage, but we have two major concerns with this approach. So one concern is that, say, the complete manufacturing network of the Netherlands or Europe is connected to just a single service provider. This creates a major dependency on this one partner. What if this company raises its prices for 400%? Yeah, we have to go along with it because we are dependent on it. So this is not ideal. But at the same time, this is also not a really realistic scenario, because there is not one service provider, but there might be 10, 20, 40, maybe 100 providers. And then the question is, does every company need 100 connections to all these service providers? Because yeah, that's still not super scalable. So it's already an improvement of the previous scenario, but we are not there yet. So the model we have proposed within SCSN is basically harnessing the advantages of the second model, of the service provider model, but then adding one additional layer on top of it. So what we have done is we've integrated all these service providers, which are illustrated in blue over here, and we have integrated them in one data space. So, and in this data space, all the service providers can communicate with each other. So as an end user, for example, a manufacturing company, you can pick a service provider of choice. Once you're connected, you can communicate with all the customers of this service providers, but also with the customers of all the other service providers. This creates, of course, major scalability advantages. And you can also compare this to, for example, the telecom sector, where we have also different telecom providers, which are all interconnected due to strict rules and regulations. Furthermore, we have created governance on this network. So there's now the not-for-profit foundation, a Smart Connect Supply Network, which governs all the agreements between these different parties and also the technical and the semantical standards. So this is already what we have achieved a few years ago, and we are now up and running for quite a while. So this is not just an idea, but it's already being done in practice. So we have about 10 of these service providers, which are basically reselling SCSN communications to their network. And we have about 300 users of these 10 service providers. And this is growing rapidly because we have such a large network of network effect, basically. Okay, so if we hear all this, we want to share some lessons learned based on this. So first of all, as already mentioned previously, and also in my presentation, there are different ways to communicate with each other and to be interoperable. So this is a framework called the new European Interoperability model. And there is a differentiation between 4 types of interoperability. The technical layer, so this network we just talked about, the semantics, the language, but also organizational. So think about processes and other important things which need to be agreed on. And finally, there is also legal interoperability, which is still a very tricky point, but luckily a lot of European regulations really help in this aspect. So you can be interoperable on multiple levels, and in order to become an effective data space, you need all these types of interoperabilities. And of course, you do not need to start from scratch. So you can also reuse existing standards. So in our case, we use the International Data Spaces Standard and Gaia-X for the bottom layers. So mainly this technical interoperability is ensured using IDS and Gaia-X. Parts of the semantical interoperability also, but this might also be domain specific. So each domain has a different type of language you want to speak. And the same counts for organizational and legal. There are, of course, some guidelines which are already shown, like the Open Day paper, but this is not something which is already completely filled in for all the domains. There are some guidelines, but you still need to think about how you want to frame this. And of course, there are questions on all these levels. So one of the important ones, which Esther already noted, is what are the stakeholders of the ecosystem? And of all these stakeholders, what is their business case? Because there needs to be a business case for all the users in the data space. Otherwise, it's not going to scale. You just have to identify that from the beginning and really ensure that everyone has value added because of joining this initiative. All kinds of other governance models can be considered, and this is in the end also a very important decision to be made in order to make a sustainable data space, which spans not just projects but also beyond these projects and becomes a long-living ecosystem. Yeah, and secondly, I want to share with you the insight of the notion called data spaces 2.0. So we see that all kinds of new data spaces are emerging in Europe, but even beyond Europe. And there we are thinking a lot about the interconnection between these data spaces. So say if you have two data spaces, how can you ensure that the end users and the service providers of these data spaces can communicate to each other? Yeah, and there we, of course, utilize all kinds of federated approaches, for example, of Gaia-X. And we are working in this in various initiatives. Also, initiative launched this week together with the largest telecom provider of Japan, NTT Communications. Our vision is that there will not be one data space. We would love that, of course, SCSN would conquer the world, but we are realistic. There are many, many great initiatives. And in the end, we envision a federation of all these data spaces, where customers of a certain data space can also connect to other data spaces via all these links which are available between these data spaces. And yeah, this is still research, so we are still working on this. We're actively developing this, and we're also hoping to come into contact with all these new data spaces to see the possibilities of enlarging our networks. So I think this is a win-win situation for everyone, scaling up data spaces, making sure that we get connected on large scale. So with this, I would like to close the presentation. So thank you a lot, and back to Tomo.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's a splendid presentation on actual data spaces, which has been, you have been doing quite a lot of work and long time also. And I could, there was in the end also roll call to the participation. I think as I interpreted it that way. But then again, it's when you have this, just wondering that when you have this service providers, so it means that the service provider is looking at some business model maybe and can create aggregates of data from other service providers. Is that right?
Yes, this is correct. So the service providers each have their own proposition, and they connect to the other service providers, and as a service basically, and they take care of this technology of technical interoperability. So the end users are basically outsourcing this as a service.
Okay, very good. I was just thinking that if there is this aggregation, so it's also the contracts and are done by your framework, or is there something that needs to be discussed every time, or how does it go? How does the process go?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. So we have this not-for-profit foundation, SCSN, and this foundation has drafted contracts with the service providers. So each individual service provider has clear rules and regulations on what their obligations are and and what they can do. And this legal framework is managed by this foundation, and it's basically operated by these service providers. And that's how we jointly cooperate within the SCSN. And then finally, the service providers all have legal contracts with their customers, the end users basically of SCSN.
Okay, very good. Now, Ed, did you have something in your mind?
I did. Thank you, Tomo. Mike, fantastic presentation. I always enjoy learning more about the initiative. You've got a very impressive technical setup, and you shared some of the experiences with that. I'm wondering from a business model point of view and from a sustainability point of view, you said 300 users in there. That's very impressive. Are there any discussions about, have they reached a point where it's becoming self-sustainable in terms of financing and support, or is there any thoughts on that, or what's the status of it?
Yeah, also a great point. Thank you, Ed. So indeed, this not-for-profit foundation cannot make a profit, but has to be sustainable in the end.
we had
Recording
for
in
our
progress.
services. And then what we did is we actually applied that to the different support services that we actually had within our data space. So you can see here on the left, we have our different star ratings effectively showing the technical maturity. And then on each of these columns, we have a data space support service that helps us control and manage the data space and how users interact with it. So we have things like a data catalog, access control services, search and querying, across the data space. And as you go along these different stars, you can see more and more sophisticated ways of being able to access the data. So if you look at the search and querying at the most basic level, you can have browsing across the data sources in the data space, which you'd expect to find in an open data catalog. At the most extreme version of this, the most advanced version of this, you can have a question answering system across the data space where you just ask the data space a question, tell me what are the highest selling products that we have in my company in North America in the last 3 quarters, and the data space will actually respond with that with the answer. So you have that kind of Alexa-like, Siri-like interaction with your data space in a very, very sophisticated question answering type approach. So this is a very useful way to look at it from a technology point of view. It gives us ideas about the sophistication of the data services that we create. It gives us an understanding of what's possible beyond our current implementation. So these are useful types of tools. And as Mike mentioned as well, this is also useful in the context of the Data Space Business Alliance and also some of the work done from ITSA on their radar. Within BDVA, though, what we also are recognizing is that data spaces are not just a technical challenge. And with BDVA being an industry-led initiative, what we're really focused on is looking at those other opportunities that exist and those other challenges that we have. So Tomo talked about the challenges that we have around skills, around business models, around organizational change. And you've seen this data sharing wheel a number of times. But when you look at this, what you can realize is that for each of these pillars that we have, there can also be different levels of maturity that exist there, different levels of governance, whether it's about the actual data governance itself or the governance of our data space within our organization or between our organizations. You can have different levels of maturity of how we engage with our people within the data space in terms of skilling and adoption of the data space. And this moves us into another area of maturity models, which are connected, but it's much more looking at this organizational perspective of maturity models. And this is an example of, again, that maturity model concept applied, but this time using ratings that actually make more sense from an organizational perspective. So in terms of processes, at the bottom, you can have very, very ad hoc processes that are not that mature, that are not that standardized, that are random across the organization. And then you can move further up to having more sophisticated, proactive management of your data space, where your processes within inside your organization are actually focusing, proactively looking for opportunities to maximize the benefit of the value of the data space for your organization and being proactive in terms of seeking those opportunities. And again, maturity models have been applied to organizational management within a number of different areas, whether it's green IT, organizational design, etc. So what we've done in TF10, working with colleagues, Tomo and many others in the call, and listening as well, is we've started to try to understand, well, from this organizational perspective, how can we identify low maturity and high maturity within our data spaces? And we've got some examples here, like on a low maturity data space might be a collection of uncoordinated, isolated projects within the organization. There's low levels of data space skills within our organization. We're relying on a couple of key people, some subject matter experts, those passionate, let's say, evangelists that Esther was talking about. But it's only a couple of key people there. Our metrics for the organization and our data space are kind of vague. Maybe there's not an awful lot of resourcing that's been allocated to it. Maybe it's a static kind of setup. Compared to a high maturity data space and how an organization would engage with that, where you'd have coordinated data space activities across the whole organization. You're looking at trying to develop a data space expertise beyond just single individuals, but trying to have that expertise across the organization as well. You've got meaningful metrics. You have appropriate, efficient and effective resourcing. You have a comprehensive understanding in the organization about how a data space can drive organizational value and benefit for it. So these were the conversations that we had in TF10, very much focused on this organizational perspective as a complement to the more technical perspective that we have talked about earlier on. The work that we've done in TF10 has then been to try to design this organizational maturity model for data spaces, taking that data sharing wheel that we have, and then projecting out, understanding what are those practices, what are those maturity curves that we have, with a little bit of technology in there, but mostly talking about organizational capabilities, business capabilities, skills capabilities. And from that, we're able to devise our maturity matrix that we have that help us understand at this initial level, this embryonic stage of data spaces, what are the different types of capabilities and the different types of maturities that could exist out there across each of these different pillars that we have in our data sharing wheel. In terms of where we are with this work, it's still work in progress, but we're now moving into our assessment phase. And the idea with the assessments is that we will work with organizations now to help them understand the scope and the goal of their data space activities. They want to be able to understand, well, what's their current level of maturity of their data space activities. And then once they've done this initial assessment, we can actually then use the tool to figure out how will you systematically develop and manage your data space capabilities. And then finally, how do you manage it over time? Will you have a development roadmap where you can identify in 2 years, this is what our data space capability would look like. In 5 years, it might look like this. What's great about this particular work and what's great about what's happening in the community right now is that the Data Space Business Alliance is bringing all of this work together that's happening in ITSA, in Fireware, and BDVA and others. And it's giving us a place where we can all bring all this work together and maximize the value of it. And we're hopeful that this work will actually feed into the DSBA activities in addition to the radar and the capability assessment that ITSA are doing as well. So I think it's a very exciting time and it's great to be involved. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what was happening in TF10 in relation to design. And that's it for me. Tomo, over to you.
Thank you very much. So many insights there about this maturity modeling and what is needed and what kind of perspectives we do need in it. So it's not so simple to because we have to look at so many things that at the same time. So thank you, Ed. So I think we are sort of like out of time already, and I feel that there would be quite a lot of discussions and questions to Ed also. And I would say that just if you are interested, so welcome to TF10 in the BDVA. And we are doing this constantly. That we are having fun there. So and doing this at the same time. But I think that maybe there's like 4 minutes to go. So maybe we could go around all the presenters here. That I was just thinking as a last question that now that there's so many things that you need to tackle and understand. So I was just thinking that because you Ed and also me, we are also in the education sometimes that are doing this, looking at the young people and they're thinking that what in earth is going on with the data spaces. So what would you say, starting from Esther, that what kind of skills those young people would need? Very briefly.
The patience and bravery to really understand what data use means in individual cases and in the ecosystem, for example, on social media platforms, but also educational data.
Thanks. Marcus.
Yeah, on my side, I think that it's the ability and the skills to start understanding what value can be created from data sharing, because this is all about in data spaces. And you give me a very shortly a good opportunity to say that we have the winter school for data spaces next week, which is a great opportunity for students to develop this kind of skills. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. That was a good pointer. Mike.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think already great answers. From my side, I would say that you really need an integrated view. It's not only technology. Technology is only helping, but you also really need to take care of the governance, the legal, the organizational aspect from the beginning. And taking into account this as a holistic approach, that might require quite some new skills to be developed.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And Ed, what is your opinion?
Yeah, I think my colleagues have done a great job in answering it. What I would say is, I think we'll need to rethink how we look at creativity. So how can you be creative with data? How can you be creative when you have one of these common European data spaces where there's all of this data available? I think that challenges us in about how we think of the creative process and how we include data within our creative processes, and how we imagine the future when we can do that. So I think it's a wonderful time to be alive.
Yeah, isn't it? Yes. This is my feeling also, that this is really splendid and extraordinary situation in life, that this kind of many things happen, and it's all around the European Union where we live, and so on. So it's really, and we are like within this group also that having all these ideas and creativity now. So it's the future will tell that how things will happen. But I think I will have to now, unfortunately, close the session, and thank you a lot for all those people who have been listening for us, and thank you for the wonderful, great presenters and sharing their valuable perspectives to us, and I think the work will go on, and we'll see you also in the future. Thank you very much, everybody, and see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.